Future Kage here. The audio is slightly choppy throughout the video. However, it's much better than what it was the first time I tried to record it, and I don't want to go through the hassle of trying to record it a third time, so, you'll just have to, I guess, try to deal with it. Also, my jacket is the same World War I German jacket from my Reichskommissariat video. However, I'm wearing that one primarily because I don't have a Easter Rising or Irish Civil War era uniform yet. However, I am in the process of attempting to compile the parts for one. So, with that being said, here's the video. This is my second attempt to record this video because the first one, the fucking audio was a bit screwy. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, salutations. In order to try to get out some more videos in between my longer videos, I've decided that I'll begin to do some hopefully shorter and easier videos to fill in the gaps. For example, my first and, at the current moment, most recent long-form video was my Reichskommissariat video. And I'm currently working on a Polish resistance script. I promise, I've said that, well, I promise if you're one of my, friends watching this, Carve Key, one of them, and I've said for the past, multiple months that I'm working on that, I promise it's coming. So, to fill in the space in the middle, I'm making another series that is more or less the same content, where I just give a brief, very brief, concise, breakdown of a historical subject, but this little series is more so based on, or I guess more so, themed around individual people as opposed to entire countries and or multi-year long events. With that being said, Video Agus Falce. Kage Isanem Dom. This is the first episode in my lesser known figure series, where I talk about some notable people of history that I believe don't get enough attention outside of their home countries and or the areas where they're well known for whatever event that happened to take place. In the first episode, we will learn about a man who led an attempted uprising with the goal of liberating his homeland from the grip of the British Empire, the person who most people, myself included, call the leader of the 1916 Easter Rising, Tomás Séamus o Cléirigh, or Thomas James Clarke. I'd like to start off by specifying that the majority of people that I'm going to be mentioning and the majority of places I'm going to be mentioning have both an Irish spelling of their name and an anglicized English spelling of their name, unless I cannot find one in the native language. For the vast majority of these people and places, I'm going to be referring to them in their Irish names for two reasons. One, because I just think when it comes to foreign figures and locations and stuff, and I always feel that the native names in their native language are better and just overall sound nicer than the English variants. And more importantly, when it comes to this, since this one's Irish, I am in the process of learning the Irish language, which I'll probably go into more detail on that in a video in the future. By repeating these names over and over, hopefully I'll be able to better grasp in my head how to properly read as well as pronounce Welga. I will, however, be adding their anglicized names under the photos of each person or whatever. And if anyone watching this video happens to speak Irish, or at least a little bit of it, I'm sure you know who I'm primarily referring to in this, wants to, I guess, use the comment section or whatever to try to, I guess, basically grade me on my pronunciations of these, feel more than welcome, because I feel like that would be not only helpful for me, but also really fun. Well, to Séamus. Tomás Séamus o Cléirigh was born on March 11th, 1858, in the small village of Milford-on-Sea in Hampshire County, England. More specifically, he was born in Hurst Castle, the coastal fort originally built by King Henry VIII to repel invaders from France. His parents were Mary Palmer and Séamus o Cléirigh, an officer in the British Army. It was the couple's first child out of two, Tomás Agus Jaharbeag Siasuk. Shortly after birth, O'Cleirigh and his family would reside in Cape Colony for a few years while his father was stationed in the area, until being transferred up to Tyrone in 1855 when Tomás was 7. in the town of Dungannon, where he would spend the remainder of his childhood. Dungannon, in the mid-19th century, was a hot spot for anti-British and paramilitary sentiment, as well as a particularly hard-hit area by Angharta Mór, with all these events not only heavily involving the British military and or government, but also being well within living memory for most of the town. Dungannon was a key center for Irish nationalism and Fenianism, or members of underground pro-Irish organizations. With Tomás living there since the tail end of his early childhood, these ideals and practices definitely rubbed off on the young boy. In 1867, the region became a point of interest by the Brochas Poblach Macheron, who had begun to take up arms across Ireland. Cléirigh took notice of the IRB in the area and would soon join the organization in 1878 at the age of 20 after prominent member Sean O'Daly visited Dungannon, with O'Daly swearing him in. 2 years later, in 1880, Cléirigh was the head of the IRB in Dungannon. Cléirigh took part in a series of riots against the local police force as well as the Constable Rioga na HÉireann after an RIC member had shot and killed a man. That August, members of the IRB attacked some RIC members and managed to steal some of their weapons. Cléirigh, having been involved in the attack, fled to the U.S. in 1880 out of fear that he would be arrested or killed. Upon his arrival, Cléirigh would meet up with some of his friends from Ireland and join up with Clan na Nail, the IRB's movement located in America. The American branch of the organization was just as significant as the domestic Irish branch, as well as much easier to gain traction in due to America having more freedoms than the British Empire. So friendly sentiment towards the cause grew faster and easier. It was Clan na Nail who would be the mind behind a string of bombings in England from 1871 to 1875. Targets involved military outposts, police stations, supply routes, roadways, prisons, and more. By the end of the campaign, 4 people, including 1 child, were dead and at least 86 others had been injured. Cléirigh was sent to England in 1883 with instructions to plan and detonate dynamite charges at government facilities throughout London. However, what neither the IRB nor the CNG knew was that the British police were already well aware of the plan. Passing information solely by using secret informants, at least one of these informants began to leak information to the British authorities. Cléirigh, as well as other plotters, were unknowingly followed by the British almost everywhere they went. Using the alias Henry Wilson, Cléirigh was arrested, tried, and sentenced in a British court in June of 1883 to penal servitude for life. Cléirigh was initially locked up in Millbank Prison before being moved to Chatham and then to Portland. During this period, he would undergo grueling and harsh conditions as well as torture, deprivation, and isolation. For a time, he would find himself sharing a prison with O'Daly. As prisoners were forbidden from making verbal contact with anyone, the two created a way of communication with rhythmic tapping on the walls where the other would hear the tapping from down the hallway. O'Daly, after going on a hunger strike that nearly killed him, would be amnestied out of the prison, leaving Tomás more or less by himself. He himself would be released in an amnesty, along with 4 other Fenian inmates in 1898, the last 5 Fenian prisoners in Britain, over 15 years after his sentencing. Cléirigh would move down to the town of Lumenach after his release, living with O'Daly and his niece Caitlin. Tomás grew fond of the young woman, and she also believed in the Irish Republic, and was involved in Republican circles for all her life. They eventually married in 1901. In 1899, Tomás and Caitlin would immigrate to America because he was unable to find work back in Ireland. They would both resume involvement with the Clan na Nail almost immediately after returning. Cléirigh would soon begin working alongside one of the most significant Fenian figures in America, John O'Donoghue, where he would help launch and serve as assistant editor in the CNG's newspaper, the Gaelic American, in 1903. After 6 years living in the country, Tomás and, presumably, Caitlin O'Cléirigh would become official U.S. citizens in late 1905. Shortly after, Tomás would begin a bout with ill health and quit working for the Gaelic American, and he would afterwards move with his wife to a farm in Manorville in eastern Long Island. It was during their period of living in America that Tomás and Caitlin would have 3 children. In November of 1907, the family returned to Ireland, settling in Bahia Achlia and opening a small tobacco shop. They would use the shop to subtly get in contact with other Fenian groups, including the higher-ups of the reorganized IRB, including John Bulmer Hobson and Sean McDermott. The men would begin recruiting members for what would become the build-up for the Éire Amach na Cásca. Cléirigh would eye out Pádraig MacParish of the Conradh na Gaeilge. Some members saw Parish as untrustworthy due to his advocacy for Irish home rule under Britain as opposed to independence up until 1912, but he would join the IRB in late 1913. The motion and pressure was rapidly building up. In 1913, the Dublin lockout began, where over 200,000 workers went on strike due to primarily poor working conditions and their inability to be able to unionize. It lasted until early 1914, when the majority of the workers went back to their positions as it was becoming harder and harder to feed their families. One of the leaders of the strike, Seamus O'Connelly, formed the Arm Caharcha na HÉireann. Up north, citizens who wished to remain loyal to Britain formed the Ulster Volunteer Force, with the purpose of destroying support for Irish home rule. Cléirigh believed that the creation of the UVF could show his pro-independence fighters that they too could come together to fight and free Ireland. The IRB would soon after begin to formalize their own proper fighting force, the Oglainlacheran, and arm up their own men. They would secure 2 shipments of weapons 2 days before the Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on the Kingdom of Serbia, beginning World War I. Cléirigh believed that the IRB could use Britain's focus on mainland Europe, especially after the German invasion of Belgium, to their advantage, as British garrisons would be much weaker than normal due to so many British forces being shipped off to France. As a result, a council was set up with Cléirigh as well as Eamon Kant and Joseph Plunkett. Cléirigh and MacDiarmid joined soon afterward. Eventually, 2 final members joined the council. O'Connelly, due to the IRB fearing that he would use his army and create a conflict early before they were ready, and Tomás and Néisilis Macdonkaya, bringing the total up to 7. It was around this time that the date for a rebellion had been set, Easter Sunday, April 23rd, 1916. The majority of IRB members were kept in the dark about this fact until the last few days. Even the volunteer leader, Ewan MacNeil, was unaware of the date until the final week. The day before, he rescinded the volunteer army's orders to fight and instead had them stand down after hearing that the armed shipment Cléirigh had requested from the German Empire was intercepted, leading to the council almost ending the rising before it really started. The council chose to not abort the rising entirely, but to rather simply delay it for a day to clear up MacNeil's orders. In the meantime, each council member would figure out where they themselves would be stationed when the rising did begin. Cléirigh was one of 5 who would head to the Rising's HQ in the Ardleifig an Forst. On Monday morning, Cléirigh, O'Connelly, and Plunkett would lead a column of about 150 Irish citizens to the GPO and occupy the building, officially beginning the Éirí Amach na Cosca, the Easter Rising. During the fighting, Cléirigh himself would not be a dedicated combatant, but he would periodically take a rifle and shoot at the British lines out in the streets. He was primarily a main source of morale for the fighters due to the bravery he showed leading up to and during the Rising. As the Rising continued, Cléirigh would start making more strategic decisions, such as where to send reinforcements or what buildings needed to be secured. However, hopes for a nationwide rebellion faded, and the Rising was mostly contained to just Baile Ach. By Thursday, O'Connelly was badly injured, and Cléirigh was beginning to lose himself from the immense stress and severe lack of both sleep and supplies. It was inevitably decided on Friday, April 29th, to surrender to the British forces. The Éirí Amach na Cosca was over. The military council chose to formally surrender Saturday morning, with Cléirigh being the only member who wished to keep fighting. During his trial, Cléirigh did not choose to attempt to defend himself or his actions, as he viewed any attempt to do so as more or less pointless. During his imprisonment, he would be able to see his wife Kathleen for the last time on May 2nd. He had forbidden her from taking part in the Rising. He had asked her to forward a message to the people of Ireland on his behalf. My comrades and I believe we have struck the first successful blow for freedom, and so sure as we are going out this morning, so sure will freedom come as a direct result of our action. This belief, we die happy. Tomás Séamus Cléirigh would be executed by firing squad at Príosún Hilménon on the morning of May 3rd, 1916, at the age of 58. He'd be survived by his wife, Kathleen Bon Cléirigh, and their 3 children. After the death of her husband, Kathleen would be elected into Andara Dáil, being one of the key figures against An Conradh Angla Iarnach, alongside people like Cathal Brugha and Éamon de Valera. She would go on to become a founding member of Fianna Fáil and Party Poblachtánach in 1926, and was the first woman to be given the title of Admhaire Baile Ach in 1939. She passed away in a Liverpool funeral home in 1972 at the age of 94, and received a state funeral in Ireland. And that concludes the first episode of my lesser-known figure series. Yes, I'm aware it was incredibly short, but as I've mentioned in the Reichskommissariat video, I am by no means a professional when it comes to script writing, researching, or really any of the sort when it comes to any of this. And when it comes to making my videos, I am completely solo with no one else to give me assistance. So I can almost guarantee that either I missed some things entirely, or I did give some information, but it happened to be incorrect to an extent. So if there was something that you, the viewer, spotted that either I got wrong or left out entirely, please feel free to correct me using the comment section below. I not only encourage it, but greatly appreciate it. With that being said, Gorav Mahagov, Ashut Tuhid Ama.